I never thought a single night could shatter everything I knew about love, trust, and myself. My name is Amelia, and just yesterday I was hiking through the wild, untamed forests of Oregon with my husband Ethan, chasing a fleeting spark to reignite our fading connection. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and we stumbled upon a mysterious cabin in the heart of the wilderness, a stranger's piercing gaze and a forbidden moment turned my world upside down. Now, with guilt clawing at my heart, and Ethan's silence cutting deeper than the cold, I'm left wondering if we'll ever find our way back, both from this forest and from the devastating secret that threatens to destroy us. What did I do in that cabin, and can our marriage survive the truth? Picture this. I'm standing at the edge of a memory so sharp it cuts, the kind of moment that splits your life into a before and an after. My name is Amelia, and at 35, I've spent the last 8 years building a life with Ethan, my husband, who's 38 and carries a quiet strength beneath his reserved nature. He's the kind of man who can sit in silence for hours, lost in thought, but then surprise you with a wild idea that turns your world upside down. That spontaneity of his, it's a double-edged sword, a spark that's both thrilling and dangerous, often dragging us into situations we're not ready for. Our marriage, while steady, has started to feel like a well-worn path, each day blending into the next in our suburban Oregon home. I've always been the one chasing something deeper, a connection, a sense of purpose. But lately, it's like I can feel time slipping through my fingers, grain by grain. That's why, on a restless autumn morning, I didn't hesitate when Ethan suggested we ditch the routine and go hiking. No itinerary, no map, just the raw urge to break free from the monotony that's been suffocating us. I remember the way my heart raced as I stuffed my backpack with a handful of granola bars and a water bottle that was only half full, not even bothering to check if we had enough for the day. Ethan was already at the car, that boyish grin on his face as he tossed his weathered hiking boots into the trunk, the leather scuffed from years of impulsive adventures just like this one. The air outside was crisp, biting at my cheeks with the promise of something new as we drove toward the Cascade Range, the dense, untamed forests looming on the horizon like a challenge we couldn't resist. When we stepped out of the car and into the wilderness, it felt like we were shedding our old selves. The crunch of dried leaves under my boots was a rhythm I hadn't realized I'd missed, and the towering pines stretched endlessly above us, their branches knitting together to block out the sky. It was as if the forest had swallowed us whole, wrapping us in a silence so thick it pressed against my ears. Ethan reached for my hand, his fingers warm against the chill, and for a moment, I felt that old spark between us, the kind that used to ignite late-night escapades and whispered promises under the stars. We laughed as we stumbled over roots, teasing each other about who'd trip first, the weight of our everyday lives lifting with every step deeper into the unknown. But beneath that excitement, there was a whisper of something darker, a nagging thought I couldn't shake. We hadn't prepared for this. Not really. No map, no plan, just blind faith that nature would be kind to us. I remember glancing at Ethan, his face lit with that reckless joy, and wondering if we were tempting fate by diving headfirst into a world we didn't understand. The forest felt alive in a way I couldn't explain, a presence that seemed to watch us from the shadows of every ancient tree. As we ventured deeper into the forest that first morning, the air was thick with the scent of damp moss, earthy and sharp, clinging to my senses like a memory I couldn't place. Somewhere above, a hawk let out a piercing cry, its call echoing through the stillness, and I couldn't help but shiver at the sound. Sunlight pierced through the dense canopy in golden streaks, painting the forest floor in fleeting patches of warmth that danced as the breeze rustled the leaves. Ethan and I couldn't stop chuckling as we tripped over gnarled roots, our boots slipping on the uneven ground. I jabbed at him, saying he'd get us lost with his so-called sense of direction, and he fired back, claiming I couldn't read a map even if it was tattooed on my hand. It felt good, that playful banter, like we were peeling back the layers of routine that had dulled us over the years. There was this one moment, maybe an hour into our hike, where I stopped dead in my tracks near a small waterfall, its trickle a soft whisper against the quiet. The water shimmered like liquid crystal, cascading over moss-covered rocks, and I just had to capture it. I pulled out my phone, framing the shot, when out of nowhere, Ethan scooped up a handful of icy water and splashed it right at me. The cold bit into my skin, shocking a gasp out of me, and I spun around to see him doubled over with laughter, his eyes bright with mischief. For a heartbeat, we were just us again. No weight, no worries, just a shared spark of joy. I lunged at him, pretending to retaliate, and we stumbled together, laughing so hard my sides ached, the forest swallowing the sound as if it were jealous of our happiness. But that lightness didn't last. The sky shifted without warning, dark clouds rolling in like a curtain drawn over the sun. The temperature plummeted, and a biting wind howled through the trees, tugging at my jacket with invisible fingers. I felt the first prick of unease as I glanced at Ethan, his face tightening as he noticed the change too. We fumbled for our GPS device, a cheap thing we'd barely tested before this trip, only to watch in horror as the screen flickered erratically before going black. No signal, no bars, just a useless piece of plastic in my trembling hands. My stomach twisted as I realized how exposed we were, miles from anything familiar. We started bickering then, our voices cutting through the wind. Me insisting we head back the way we came, him arguing we should push forward to find a landmark. Frustration sharpened every word, and I could feel the tension coiling between us as the trail we'd been following vanished under a thick layer of fallen leaves and tangled undergrowth, like the forest itself was erasing our path. My legs were already aching, each step heavier than the last, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps as the cold crept deeper into my bones. Hours had passed since we lost our way, and the forest had turned into a labyrinth of shadows, each tree looking more menacing than the last. My hands were numb, my fingers stiff as I clung to Ethan's arm, both of us shivering under the weight of a night we weren't sure we'd survive. That's when we saw it, a faint glow in the distance, flickering like a beacon through the dense fog that had settled around us. A cabin, nestled in a small clearing, its silhouette barely visible against the darkening sky. Hope surged in my chest, a desperate, fragile thing, as we stumbled toward it, the promise of shelter pulling us forward like a lifeline. Every step toward that cabin felt heavier, like the ground itself was trying to hold us back. The warped wooden steps leading up to the porch groaned under my weight, each creak echoing in the stillness, sharp and grating, like a warning I couldn't quite decipher. I ran my hand along the railing, feeling the rough, splintered surface bite into my palm, the wood damp and cold from the mist. The door loomed ahead, its paint peeling in long, curling strips, revealing the gray, weathered grain beneath. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years, like time itself had forgotten this place. A faint smell of burning wood seeped through the cracks, curling into my nostrils, acrid and warm, a stark contrast to the icy air that bit at my face. It was a smell that promised life, heat, safety. But there was something else beneath it, something I couldn't name, something that made my stomach churn with unease. Ethan stood beside me, his breath visible in short, shaky puffs. His hand trembled as he raised it to knock, the sound of his knuckles against the wood dull and hollow, swallowed almost instantly by the oppressive quiet of the forest. We waited, the silence stretching on, agonizing and thick, pressing against my chest until I could barely breathe. My heart pounded in my ears, each beat louder than the last, as I wondered if anyone was even there, or if we'd stumbled upon something we weren't meant to find. Just when I thought we'd have to turn back into the freezing dark, the door creaked open, slow and deliberate. revealing a figure that seemed carved from the wilderness itself. He was a gray-haired man, his face weathered and rough, like the bark of an ancient tree that had withstood countless storms. His eyes were sharp, unreadable, piercing through me with an intensity that made me take an involuntary step back. Later, he'd gruffly offer his name, Gideon, and it fit him, heavy and old, like a name pulled from forgotten stories. His presence was both intimidating and oddly grounding, as if he belonged to this forest in a way we never could. His hands, resting at his sides, were calloused and scarred, marked by years of hard labor, each line telling a story of survival I couldn't begin to imagine. When he spoke, his voice was low and gravelly, rumbling from deep in his chest, each word deliberate, like he weighed every syllable before letting it out. "You're not the first to get lost here," he muttered, his expression hardening, his brow furrowing as if our presence was an intrusion he'd long expected. But nothing happens without reason. Ethan shifted beside me, his voice tight with desperation as he stepped forward, his words tumbling out in a rush. He explained how we'd lost our way, how the cold was closing in, how we had nowhere else to turn. There was a raw edge to his tone, a mix of embarrassment and pleading, his hands gesturing helplessly as he spoke. I stood silent, my throat tight, watching Gideon's face for any sign of softening, any hint of mercy. But his gaze didn't linger on Ethan for long. It shifted to me, heavy and unyielding, lingering in a way that made my skin prickle with something I couldn't name. Fear, maybe, or something darker, something that stirred deep in my gut. The air between us seemed to thicken, charged with an unspoken tension that made my pulse quicken. After a long, suffocating pause, Gideon finally spoke again, his words cryptic. As Gideon's cryptic words hung in the air from moments before, he stepped aside, gesturing for us to enter the cabin. The door creaked shut behind us with a finality that made my chest tighten, sealing us off from the biting cold of the forest night. I took a tentative step forward, my boots scuffing against the uneven wooden floor, and let my eyes adjust to the dim, flickering light inside. The interior of the cabin was raw and unpolished, a stark reflection of the wilderness outside. The rough-hewn walls seemed to lean inward, their surfaces scarred and weathered, as if they'd absorbed every harsh winter and lonely night this place had endured. Shadows danced across them, cast by the fire burning in a stone hearth at the center of the room. The flames crackled and popped, sending erratic bursts of light that made the shadows twist and writhe like living things watching us from the corners. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and smoke, a thick, earthy mix that clung to the back of my throat with every breath. It was both comforting and suffocating, a reminder of how far we were from anything familiar. The furnishings were sparse, almost skeletal in their simplicity. A narrow bed sat against one wall, its frame sagging under the weight of a threadbare blanket that looked like it hadn't been washed in years. Nearby, a rickety table stood on uneven legs, its surface scratched and stained, holding nothing but a single dented tin cup. A lone chair, its wood splintered at the edges, was positioned by the fire, as if someone had spent countless nights staring into the flames, lost in thoughts too heavy to share. Every detail of this place screamed isolation, a life stripped down to its barest bones. Gideon didn't say much at first. His movements were slow, deliberate, as he pointed Ethan toward a small side room off the main space. I peered past the doorway as Ethan shuffled forward, his shoulders slumped, his head bowed like a man carrying a weight he couldn't put down. The room was barely more than a closet, a cramped, dark space with nothing but a thin mattress on the floor, its edges frayed and stained. Ethan didn't look back at me as he stepped inside, didn't meet my eyes, and the silence between us was a chasm I didn't know how to cross. I wanted to call out to him, to say something, anything, to ease the tension that had been building since we got lost, but the words stuck in my throat. The door to that tiny room closed with a soft thud, And just like that, I was alone with Gideon in the main space, the crackling of the fire, the only sound breaking the oppressive quiet. I stood there, rooted to the spot, as Gideon moved to the hearth. He lifted a dented kettle from a hook above the flames, the metal blackened from years of use, and poured a steaming liquid into that tin cup on the table. The sharp, bitter scent of herbal tea wafted toward me, cutting through the smoky air. Without a word, he pushed the cup in my direction, his scarred fingers brushing the edge of the table as he stepped back. I hesitated, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for it, the warmth of the tin seeping into my cold palms. I brought it to my lips, taking a small sip to steady my nerves, the bitter taste biting at my tongue, grounding me in a way I hadn't expected. My eyes flicked to Gideon, watching as he turned to the fire, grabbing a poker with those rough, calloused hands. He stoked the flames with practiced ease, each movement precise, almost ritualistic, as if he'd done this 1,000 times in the solitude of this cabin. The fire flared brighter under his touch, the heat washing over me, warming my skin but also making the room feel smaller, tighter, almost suffocating. I couldn't shake the storm of emotions swirling inside me as I sat on the edge of that lone chair, the cup still clutched in my hands. Fear gnawed at the edges of my mind, a constant whisper of doubt about what we'd stumbled into, about who Gideon really was beneath that stoic exterior. But there was something else, too. I'm sitting there, the bitter taste of that herbal tea still lingering on my tongue. When Gideon turns from the fire, his eyes catching mine in a way that sends a jolt through me. There's an unspoken pull, a current I can't ignore, even as every rational part of me screams to look away, to stand up, to check on Ethan. But I don't. I can't. My heart is pounding so hard I swear it's louder than the crackling of the flames, each beat echoing in my chest like a drum as Gideon steps closer. His presence is overwhelming, heavy with something I can't name, and when he gestures toward the narrow bed against the wall, my breath catches. I know I should say no, should turn away, but my feet move before my mind can catch up, following him as if drawn by some invisible thread. I sit on the edge of that sagging bed frame, the rough texture of the threadbare blanket scraping against my palms as I grip it, trying to anchor myself. The bed creaks under my weight, a sharp, protesting groan that cuts through the quiet, and I flinch at the sound, my eyes darting toward the thin wall separating me from Ethan. I can almost feel him there, in that cramped side room, lying on that frayed mattress, probably staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My chest tightens with guilt, a weight so heavy it feels like it's crushing me. But then Gideon's hand finds my shoulder. His touch is firm, not harsh, steady in a way that suggests he's done this before, though there's no cruelty in it, just a quiet certainty. My skin prickles under his calloused fingers, a shiver running down my spine as I struggle to breathe, caught between the storm of emotions tearing through me. I should stop this. I know I should. Ethan is right there, just beyond that flimsy barrier, and every creak of the bed, every rustle of fabric feels like a betrayal carved into the air. But there's another part of me, a part I'm ashamed to even acknowledge, that's drawn to this moment, to the raw intensity of it. It's like a dam breaking inside me, all the tension, the fear, the numbness of the past hours, years even, spilling out in a rush I can't control. I let myself get lost in the heat of it, in the way Gideon's presence seems to fill the room, drowning out the guilt for just a fleeting second. It's not just about the physical, though that's there, undeniable, a wildfire I can't extinguish. It's about feeling alive, truly alive, in a way I haven't felt in so long I'd forgotten what it was like. My mind screams at me to pull back, but my body betrays me, leaning into the moment, into the forbidden. When it's over, the silence that follows is deafening. Gideon pulls away without a word, his movements as deliberate as ever, leaving me lying there on that narrow bed, staring at the cracked, shadowed ceiling. My breath comes in shallow gasps, my heart still racing. But now it's not just from the intensity of what just happened. It's from the crushing realization of what I've done. I listen, straining my ears, and I hear it. The faint sound of movement from the other room. A shift, a creak of the floor, subtle, but unmistakable. Ethan. He's awake. He heard. My stomach twists, nausea rising in my throat as I imagine him lying there, piecing it together, the thin wall doing nothing to shield him from the truth. I want to get up, to run to him, to explain, to beg for forgiveness, but I'm frozen, pinned to the bed by the weight of my own shame. I don't know how long I lie there, lost in the spiral of my thoughts. The fire has died down to embers, casting a faint, flickering glow across the room, and the air feels colder now, seeping into my bones. My mind is a battlefield, torn between the guilt that threatens to swallow me whole and the shocking, undeniable truth that I felt something in that moment with Gideon, something I can't unfeel. The morning comes too soon, a pale gray light creeping through the cracks in the cabin walls, casting long, jagged shadows across the floor. I'm already on my feet, moving with a kind of frantic urgency, pulling on my jacket and lacing up my boots with hands that won't stop trembling. The air inside feels heavier than it did last night, thick with the weight of everything that's happened, everything I can't undo. I keep my eyes on the floor, on the scuffed wood beneath my feet. Anywhere but on Gideon, I can feel his presence across the room, silent and unreadable as ever. And the thought of meeting his gaze makes my stomach churn with a mix of shame and something I can't quite name. It's like the walls themselves are watching, judging, holding on to the echoes of last night's choices. The door to the side room creaks open, and Ethan steps out, his frame filling the narrow doorway for just a moment before he shrinks into himself. His eyes are red-rimmed, hollowed out by a night of no sleep, maybe by something worse. By knowing. He doesn't look at me, not directly, just stares at some vague point near the hearth, his jaw tight, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. The silence between us is a living thing, sharp and suffocating, cutting deeper than any words could. I want to say something, to bridge this chasm that's opened up overnight, but my throat is dry, my voice lost somewhere in the mess of my thoughts. I just stand there, frozen, as the weight of his unspoken pain presses down on me. Gideon breaks the stillness, his movements slow and deliberate as he crosses the room with a scrap of yellowed paper in his scarred hands. It's a map, hand-drawn with rough, jagged lines, the ink faded but legible. He lays it on the table, the wood creaking under the slight pressure, and points to a series of marks that trace a path through the forest. His voice is curt, stripped of any warmth, as he explains the route, a hidden trail that will lead us out of this endless maze of trees and back to something resembling safety. Follow this. Don't stray. It'll take you to the main trail by midday if you keep pace. His words are clipped, final, like he's already done with us, like he's eager to erase our presence from this place. I nod, barely, my fingers brushing the edge of the paper as I take it, feeling the brittle texture under my skin, a fragile lifeline in a world that feels shattered. We step outside, the cold morning air hitting me like a slap, biting at my cheeks and seeping through the layers of my clothes. The forest is eerily quiet, the kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to break. The cabin porch creaks behind us as Gideon steps out, standing there with his arms crossed, his weathered face unreadable as he watches us go. I glance back, just for a second, and our eyes meet, his sharp and piercing, mine raw and unsteady. Then he speaks, his voice low, deliberate, each word sinking into me like a stone. You're both different now, but it's not betrayal if it's salvation. The weight of those words hits me hard, lodging somewhere deep in my chest, and I turn away quickly, unable to hold his gaze any longer. I don't know what he means, not fully, but I feel the truth of it, the way it twists inside me as Ethan and I start down the path. The map clutched tightly in my hand. The forest stretches out before us, endless and unyielding, the trees looming like silent sentinels as we trudge forward. Ethan walks a few steps ahead, his shoulders hunched, his pace steady but distant, like he's trying to outrun something more than just the wilderness. We don't speak, not a single word. The silence between us thicker than the fog that clings to the ground. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig underfoot feels amplified, a reminder of how alone we are out here, how much has changed in the span of a single night. Gideon's words keep echoing in my mind as we make our way through the forest. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.